It is indeed a great honor to have been invited to this program. It's very, very exciting and very interesting that I have been invited to this program to share some of my ideas about Periyar. I come from Bengal, where Periyar is today a name that is increasingly becoming popular. But at the same time, there is a gap in knowledge about Periyar. His publications, his writings have still to reach the people of Bengal in Bengali translation. In fact, I think I would not be wrong if I say that still much of Periyar's works have not been translated into English. I was discussing this matter yesterday with some of our friends here. English translations are very, very important, that all Periyar's works get translated into English. And after that, from English, translations to other languages would become easier, and Periyar would thereby find greater attention amongst people who are non-Tamilians and who do not understand or cannot read Tamil. So it's very important. There is an interest about Periyar in Bengal, but as I said, there is limited literature on Periyar in Bengal. Moving to another dimension of my discussion, I would start my words today by saying, and I'm sure you would all agree, India is passing through very, very difficult times. We are harping on an image of India, a highly Hinduized image of India to be built. That is the dominant discourse. That is the dominant discourse, an integrated nationalist discourse of a highly Hinduized India, which unfortunately India can never be. India is a country of diversity, and that diversity has to be acknowledged. Now, it's common to say, in promoting this image of a homogenized, Hinduized India, it is common to say that India's tradition is the tradition of Vedic India. It draws from that tradition, and that is a Hindu tradition. That is a tradition which is marked also by caste stratification, hierarchy, inequality, social inequality, intense social inequality that has grown over thousands of years and has over time been reinforced. It is also marked by patriarchal values. Marginalization of women have been justified, rationalized, and promoted. Over time, over the years, we should have shed these values. In the interests of India, we should have long shed these retrograde values. But we have not done that. In fact, as I said, we are passing through very difficult times. We are encouraging and promoting these negative values today. It is here that I would say this is not the whole picture of India. There is another India which is talking about equality, which is craving for equality, which has accommodated diversity and gender justice. Which is this other India? Of this other India, I would say, the roots go back to as old as India's Vedic tradition. Think of Buddhism. Think of Buddhism in the time of Buddha. An alternative discourse that was coming up. An alternative discourse different from caste-stratified society. Think of Jainism. Think of the Lokayoto sects, the village gods. From ancient times, you will find in remote villages, under the tree, there is the small model of a horse, a bird, or something being worshipped as God by people belonging to low caste socially, stigmatized as people of low caste. People who were not allowed entry into the temples constructed by the upper castes, which was the access of upper caste people. People who were left out from mainstream Hindu society, pushed out as marginals, untouchables, whom we call Dalits today, were the people who were trying to find a space for themselves through the worship of village gods. You will still find the existence of village gods in many, many places. Moving to medieval India, if you're looking at it, you will see that the thoughts of Nanak, think of the radical ideas of Kabir. Many of you might have read the Dohas of Kabir. A very incisive critique of the caste system, of the Brahminical system. Ruthless criticism of the Brahminical system, sarcastic criticisms of the Brahminical system. Even suggesting that the rope or the holy thread of the Brahmin is akin to the rope of the well which draws water. So these comparisons which were coming up in the Dohas of Kabir, they were significant critiques of Brahminical social structure and indicative of this alternative culture that I have been suggesting. Think of Guru Nanak Dev. Think of Sikhism. Caste does not find a place in the teachings of these people. In Bengal, from where I come, we have had thinkers like Harichand Thakur. You may have heard about Harichand Thakur, the founder of the Matua sect. Harichand Thakur, his son Guru Chand Thakur. In Kerala, Naran Guru. Again, a guru whom you may have heard about. Struggling amongst low caste Erava population, trying to find them their space, challenging Brahminism. So I'm just trying to draw a picture here, and a sketch a sketch of what I call the alternative India, an alternative culture, which was as old as the Vedic tradition, which has run parallel to it, which has challenged it time and again, and which has been fed in by many thinkers bringing their struggles into the field from different angles. It is not a single homogeneous movement that I'm talking about. Many movements, but it is like many movements that are feeding this river, this alternative river, which very assertively I say is India, which has been marginalized. So India is not just the Vedic India. This is India. Let us reclaim this India. Let us reclaim this India. Oh, if you look at these movements, many of these early movements, in fact, some of the earliest movements that I have referred to, some of the earliest movements have used the language of religion. They have operated in the religious space. They have been social movements demanding social justice, demanding uplift of their respective and other communities who have been victims of Brahminical oppression, but they have used the language of religion. Some of the oldest movements, which I have so far mentioned, there are many more, there are many, many more. These are just some that I have mentioned. Now, apart from that, there have been some movements which have operated exclusively on the social plane, some exclusively on the economic level, some in the political field later. Many of these movements have also simultaneously operated in two or more of these areas. In this line of tradition, I would locate Ambedkar, who has been, in modern India, one of the, or the most prominent leader to have challenged Brahminism in using multiple languages, using the language of social protest, using very prominently the language of politics, and using the language of religion. Because when I say using the language of religion, I refer to his conversion to Buddhism, the Navayana Buddhist movement. So looking at Ambedkar as a very, very prominent leader of modern India, challenging Brahminism from different angles, trying to introduce safeguards for the marginal, untouchable castes, then called the depressed classes, to ensure that they have constitutional security, to ensure that in India, democracy is not just a political concept. In independent India, democracy should be a holistic concept embracing the social, economic, and political spaces. That was Ambedkar. At one level, he was trying to organize the people, the untouchable castes, the depressed classes, At another level, he was bargaining with the British authorities, bargaining with the Indian National Congress, contributing to constitution making, writing as a prolific writer, combining theory and the narration of historical events of his times. So that was Ambedkar. And in the final days of his life, he converted to Buddhism, a total rejection of Hinduism. He was totally disillusioned with Hinduism. He believed Hinduism could not be corrected. It was not possible to have Hinduism and do away with the caste system. This had been the major difference, the ground of difference that Ambedkar had with Gandhi. Gandhi was sympathetic towards the sufferings of the untouchable castes, but he was not averse to the Varna system. He was a Hindu at heart, Gandhi. And we know it's a long story. I'm not going to dwell on the Gandhi-Ambedkar debate here, but we know it led to intense bitterness between Gandhi and Ambedkar. Gandhi was rejected by Ambedkar, his ideas, his standpoint, and Ambedkar was rejecting the Congress and rejecting Hinduism, moving towards Buddhism. The conversion, to my mind, was not a religious conversion primarily. It was a social movement. At a particular stage of his struggle, Ambedkar was giving this call for conversion to Buddhism. While this conversion had come at the end of his life, just a couple of months before his death, it was a very great event that was celebrated, and with thousands of his followers, he had converted to Buddhism. While it came at the end of his life, the thought process of converting had a background of nearly 20 years. So it was a long thought process, during which Ambedkar had contemplated the possibilities of converting to other religions. The basic question being, Hinduism has to be rejected by the untouchable castes. It doesn't give them space. It doesn't give them justice. We have to move out of the Hindu fold. But then, where do we go? He thought of other religions. He contemplated, and finally settled for Buddhism, because Buddhism was not talking about God. Buddhism was also basically a religion which was talking about interpersonal relations. What the values should be that would govern relations amongst the people. One-to-one relations, respecting one-to-one, equality, justice, basic values of human beings were being respected in Buddhism. That is what Ambedkar focused on and converted. So it was a struggle for social justice, reaching a particular height, reaching a particular peak when Ambedkar converts to Buddhism. It is from here that I shall take our discussion to Periyar. As I said, Ambedkar's conversion to Buddhism came just a couple of months before his death in 1956. By this time, he has rejected Hinduism. He is searching for an alternative that would talk about how people should fairly deal with one another and not have a stratified society. His search takes him to Buddhism. Ambedkar believed, he asserted, that human beings need a religion. That was his stand. His stand was not a no-God position like Periyar. Ambedkar believed people need a religion. From there, he asks the question, then what? What religion do we go for? He opts for Buddhism. That's Ambedkar's solution to the problem. And the alternative cultural frame that he was searching for is indicated in this conversion. Moving on to Periyar, I would say, Periyar has a different approach. It is the same alternative that is being searched for, developing an alternative cultural frame, resting on the premise of rejection of the Brahminical system. Resting on the rejection of the Brahminical system, Periyar is also searching for an alternative cultural frame for the people of India. But he does not go along the path of Ambedkar. His rejection of the Brahminical system means a no-God solution, a rejection of religion per se. Not an alternative religion as Ambedkar was searching for. He rejects the idea of God. He rejects the idea of religion, priesthood, all the values and of the scriptures that were being promoted in the country. All these are rejected by Periyar. And in this rejection, the basis is rationalism. Rationalism is the basis. So, the rejection of the Brahminical system, Brahminical society, building of an alternative culture, in the case of Periyar, is elaborately being formulated by him through the mechanism of rationalism, through the tool of rationalism, and using that tool, he reaches a position of a total rejection of religion per se. So that is one dimension that we need to understand. His major contribution of rationalism. And India desperately needs rationalism. The problem with religion is, any religion, a basic problem with any religion is, religion tends to be dogmatic. It tends to, I'm not just talking about Hinduism. Religion tends to make people believe, not logically argue, not logically accept. Not logically accept. There was a point in what surely what Ambedkar was indicating towards. For a people, as in India, groomed for religion, perhaps an intermediate position could be Buddhism, a more liberal religion than Hinduism, surely. But there also that problem remains. Any religion is not really promoting the argumentative individual. It will discourage the argumentative individual. It will promote belief, faith. And from there, sliding back to a position of a retrograde society is very easy. It's very easy because logic is not being used. So to encourage people to think, to use their minds, a capacity that we human beings have, and which is one of the greatest gifts of nature, I would say, that we have the capacity of thinking individually, having respect in my thought process, rather than expecting someone else to do the thinking for me. That is very, very important, and that is the basis of rationalism. And it is time, given the sort of difficulties that India, as I started by saying, is passing through, it is time that rationalism is very consciously and assertively promoted. Rationalism in India has largely been, unfortunately, on the defensive. If you belong to one religion, good. If you belong to another, even then you're acceptable. But if you're an atheist, if you don't believe in God, you're subhuman totally. That's the sort of attitude of people. No. It is important to assert the no God position. And do it with pride. Not just be on the defensive, which we have been on for a very, very long time, and which has been counterproductive. Also, I would emphasize that in the frame of thinking of Periyar, the self-respect movement was very significant. The self-respect marriages that he was trying to promote, and to a measure he succeeded in promoting. And over time, you still have self-respect marriages in Tamil Nadu. I would say, I do not know, it should have spread much, much more to push out the religious forms of marriage, and it hasn't. That is where I feel sad. But it survives. In a hostile milieu, otherwise hostile milieu, the very survival of self-respect marriages. And I have had occasion of witnessing a self-respect marriage in Tamil Nadu years back. I think it exudes self-respect. It shows self-respect. So that is important. That needs to be promoted not only in Tamil Nadu, but across India. Amongst certain other groups, I have already mentioned the Motua movement in West Bengal. Amongst certain other groups, you will also find similar attempts to exclude the Brahminical symbols and forms and develop their own systems amongst the marginalized communities. These attempts are there in different regions, in different groups. If you are looking at the communities which we refer to as Shahodhya Vaishnavas, you will find that those who are called who sing as the bauls, etc., they have simple forms of marriage. The ceremonies are very simple, just changing of garlands. No priests, nothing of the sort. So these patterns exist across India. It's a question of now tying them together, bringing them together, searching out where these patterns exist, modifying them, developing them, and keeping in mind Periyar's self-respect marriages. I think a lot can be done for developing this alternative cultural frame, not just regarding marriages, but for other ceremonies as well. A slight sidetracking here, I would say, we are ordinary human beings. We are not intellectuals. We are not superhuman. We are very simple folk. We like to have special occasions when we can celebrate, when we can meet up, have a feast, have a celebration, meet friends, meet relatives and kin, something, wear new clothes, etc., etc. Something to keep us going through life. And that is what largely religion has provided us. So we don't go into the depths of issues, we accept this. Oh, a celebration is coming. We will buy new clothes, we will have good food, we will meet up with friends, etc., etc., etc. I'm emphasizing this because it is not just enough to critique Brahmanism. It is important to provide an alternative on which this ordinary image of us can survive. Where we can have our occasions of celebration, have our occasions of meeting up, have our occasions of feasting, but together, not excluding sections of the population, which would be inclusive, not in terms of caste, which would help in removing caste and religious and gender differences. So an alternative has to be given. It's not simply a negative statement of saying that is bad. We need the alternative, and that needs to be carefully developed and promoted. That alternative could come in many ways. A great thinker's life may be celebrated. The launching of the self-respect movement by Periyar could be a very good occasion of celebration. Ambedkar's conversion to Buddhism. Across India, it is a point of celebration among certain communities in certain parts of India, but across India, it could be a day of celebration. Forget individuals, the day of a big scientific discovery could be a day of celebration. It need not be so-and-so puja or so-and-so puja. Give the alternative to ordinary people like us, so that we can say we are leaving this and we are moving into this. We find that nurturing, that space, and that has to be the alternative culture that has to be rationally, logically built. That rejects Brahmanism on the one hand and firmly gives an alternative space which people can cling to on the other hand. It has to be a simultaneous process. It has to be a simultaneous process that we need to develop this. So the self-respect marriage, I assert, has been one of the very big contributions. The self-respect movement as such and self-respect marriages, a very big contribution of Periyar, which can be taken much further ahead. And Periyar's notion of gender justice, not just rejection of caste, not just rejection of Hinduism, rejection of religion and rationalism, but gender justice. Unfortunately, I do not know why we have many universities across India where there are departments, centers for women's studies, flourishing. But nothing is taught of Periyar. Why is it so? Periyar needs to be taught. His ideas were extremely radical. So much so that even modern day feminists would fail to match up in many cases. The liberated woman who can take decisions on an equal footing is the woman that Periyar is projecting. He's talking for women's rights. He's struggling for women's rights. So that is the Periyar that we are looking at. That is the Periyar we are looking at. So I emphasize that these are areas, I think, of Periyar's thinking that should be highlighted. And projecting the story of an alternative culture, which I started from, tracing it over time, over generations, over centuries, as I was trying to do, very briefly, giving you a bird's eye view, I would say that struggle at a point has reached Periyar. And he was giving us, till then, one of the most elaborate formulations or models of an alternative culture. And we need to realize that and carry it further ahead if India is to progress rather than slide back in terms of social development. And India as a democracy cannot survive with an oppressive, stratified social system. Democracy is social, economic, and political combined. Thank you very much. I'll stop here.
உன் கடவுளை விட உன் சாஸ்திரத்தை விட உன் முன்னோரை விட உன் வெங்காயம் வழக்கமாத்தை விட உன் அறிவு பெருசு அதை சிந்தி